If you'd like to talk about your own Bigfoot encounter, or if you're looking for help from a Bigfoot investigator in your area, email me at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. No Sasquatch were harmed in the recording of this podcast. Well, Randy, we've talked about Oklahoma. Let's talk about your newer location where you've been doing research. I believe it's up in Missouri. You call it the 400?
Yes. It's a private 400 acres. I was approached in, I think, 2017 by a gentleman named Shane Carpenter. He had been having some real good exposure to these things, to a couple of different family groups of these things since 2013. And he's just kind of been forging his own path to trying to figure these things out. And he was a really good tracker. And so his forte is his tracking abilities, and that has played a huge role in his success and what he's been doing. But anyways, he was kind of, vetting me and what I was doing, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, I'm looking to gather some people together for this location. Here's what's going on. Would you be interested?" I said, "Hell to the yeah. I mean, I'll go anywhere. I've traveled up to Washington, Oregon multiple times, and I mean, you name it, I've been there. San Antonio, Texas, a ranch down there by the Guadalupe. It didn't bother me at all to get in my truck and drive 15 hours to a place. I drove to Kentucky one time just to look at somebody's game cam picture."
Wow.
I mean,
that's dedication.
I know it's to the point of ridiculously, really. I mean, when the passion is that strong that you'll spend that kind of money for just, there's people that are like, "Dude, you're just flat out crazy." Yeah, that's probably true. But I could have worse vices. I could be hanging out at the bar every weekend and wasting my money and buying a case of beer every night after work and stuff like that. But I don't. So let me go ahead and spend my money on what brings me pleasure. So anyways, I got together with Shane. He invited me to this location. He had a family unit based on the footprints from this location. There was a male that had, I believe like 16 to 18 inch tracks. A female that had like 12-inch tracks, and then there was two juveniles. And when he first started going there, the tracks were like 7.5 and 8.5 inches, the two juveniles. And over the course of the next couple of years, they've been getting an inch bigger each year. And he has casted them year after year, showing growth. So by the time I get there, it's like the third year. And so they're 8.5 and 9.5 inches at this point, or something to that effect. And you're still seeing them. There's some flats. This private 400 acres is surrounded by other rural land and just nothing but woods. I mean, there's a 700 acre tract and another 500 acre tract separate that is adjacent to this property. That's just got, I think a developer bought up the 500 acres and they live in California. So there's no roads in on that 500 acres. It's just wild and woolly. And, I think they're just hanging on to it until they can develop it or something. But until then, it's just free reign. So all of these are all connected together. So it's not like there's a postage stamp of 400 acres in the middle of New York City that we're researching. So we've got this going on, and it was because of the landowner. I think he inherited the land, and he kind of moved a camper out there just on the edge of the property, and he had some stuff happening out there, something pulling the wood burning stove stack out of the side of his trailer and throwing rocks at his trailer, and just all kinds of stuff going on that spooked him, and he didn't quite understand what was going on until he was down there hunting and he saw one. And before he saw one, he was actually finding all these structures and stuff, and some deer kills and some stuff, and he actually thought that he was dealing with some poachers. And so he had a friend of his go with him one night, and they went down there after dark and heard something running and found one of these structures, and they shot shot into the air thinking that they're running off poachers. So they had that kind of activity going on. Well, needless to say, then he's hunting down there on his own, and he sees one. There's an old rickety barn that he was hunting out of the back of in the loft area, and watching down this wood line, and one came out of the wood line that he saw. And anyway, so that was the beginning of him knowing that it wasn't poachers and there was something funky going on. And he's an older guy. So my friend who lives in Springfield heard about it from another person who said, man, you want to go down and check out that property? And my friend Shane was like, you bet. So Shane goes down there and, has a sighting light on the first time he went in there. So, and that was actually the second time that he'd ever, had something like this happen. So he starts going down there all the time. And what's smart about Shane is he learned early through his first encounter with the family group from 2013 that if he establishes a set hiking pattern that he never deviates from, he never deviated from it. And he would set it up for a month or two long where he was going in there every weekend doing the same pattern. And he learned early that he was getting movements on both sides of him in certain areas of his walk. Say like when he's going down this deep holler that was brushy on both sides, that he's going down the holler, and he would hear a knock or a noise to his right, and he would look over, and then he would hear something moving on his left. So they were coordinating movements to get ahead of him. And he was understanding these patterns early on so they would try to get ahead of you so that they could position themselves to watch you. So with that in mind, he never deviated from his pattern. So they would start to move in knowing what his pattern is. They would move into certain spots waiting on it. So he was able to snap a few pictures with his phone and getting lucky like that. But it was all because of the patterns that he set up. And so that's what he established at this 400 location, was these hiking patterns, knowing that he had success with them before. And so that was great. And so I came in on that with this pattern already set up. And we've got 2 juveniles there. At the beginning, that's what we were interacting with was 2 juveniles. I mean, we caught them on thermal. We've gotten behaviors that shows that they've got some unique behaviors. And that is when you're facing them. I've got a thermal camera that was made for a car, for high-end Cadillacs. So it's a very small thermal camera that I can put on top of my walking stick. And it's already set up for 12 volt because it's made for a car. And so I can get a small battery that sits in a fanny pack, hooks it up 12 volt, and it's on the top of my walking stick. And the monitor is hanging at my chest. So I can just look down at the monitor. And as I'm walking, I can spin my walking stick around and look behind us as we're walking. And we found that we're seeing them making their move when our backs are to them. But when we're facing them, more often than not, they freeze, even if they're exposed. They don't know that you can see them with thermal camera. Their head is poked out of the brush, and when you're facing them, they freeze, or at least there's a pattern of them freezing because they expect you to see movement. So they don't know you can't see at night, or they wouldn't be freezing at night when you're facing them. So they assume that you can see at night just the way they can.
How well do they show up on the thermal? Because there's some speculation I've heard from some people say that they believe that their hair insulates them where they can't really be seen that well on thermal.
No, they're bright white.
It's just one of those things that I hear people say, but I've never heard anybody confirm it one way or the other,
Well, here's the first time that I caught this pattern. I was at Bennett Springs, Missouri, and on some trails that you're not supposed to be in after dark. But you know how Bigfooters are. So I'm in there.
See the sign, not a problem.
Oh, sure. Didn't know anything about it. Well, I'm with some other people. And we're on these trails that you're not supposed to be in after dark, but we're in there, and I saw something. I was actually sitting in a chair at the trailhead because I wasn't that convinced that there was stuff going on there. So I'm sitting in a chair, and they're walking down this straight trail going into the woods, and I've got a good view of them for quite a distance. And there's another guy sitting with me because he didn't want to go either. He was a little overweight like me, and we're just like, I don't know if I want to go through this 4-mile hike. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching the 3 or 4 guys tootling on down the trail, and all of a sudden I'm looking at it, and we're looking at the monitor, and I'm like, how many dudes do you count there? And he was like, 5. I was like, well, isn't there only like 3 or 4? Well, there's only 4. And so we get up and we start hoofing it after them. I'm like, why am I seeing 5 guys in the screen here when there's only 4 y'all? And come to find out, from me putting together the picture, I saw something on the trail ahead of them. All they have on is these little headlamps on their head. So whatever was ahead of them on the trail looked to me like part of the group.
Right.
Because I'm looking at a straight trail and they're on it as a group. And then the 5th figure was ahead of them on the trail. And so I tell them what I saw on the screen, and they're like, wow, so that was right up here. And I was like, yeah. So they are ahead of me, and now I'm trailing behind them with my thermal camera on my walking stick. And when they get up there, one of the guys goes, hey, bring your camera over here. I hear a noise up there on the side of the hill. And so I go up there and I start panning the side of the hill to my left. I'm looking up there and and I see a little white head looking up through the brush. Way up there at the top, looking down, I see a white head and a shoulder. And I was like, there it is. I said, it's looking. I said, it's watching us. Now, this is the first time I'd ever seen one with my thermal in these conditions doing this, where I'm facing it. So I'm looking at it and it's not moving. And I'm watching it and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I need to determine, is this really what I'm looking at? But as I'm thinking about it and I'm watching it, it's getting smaller and smaller. It was slowly dropping. It wasn't moving fast enough for you to see movement, but it was slowly getting smaller and smaller until it was just a half of the head showing, and then a quarter of the head, and then it was gone. And it took 3 minutes for it to drop.
Wow.
I said, oh my God, that is brilliant. They expect you to see movement. If they did that during the day, you'd never see them.
I mean, pretty much everything in the wood works on movement whenever it comes to eyesight.
Yes. So I'm floored. I've never seen this before. So I'm thinking it's unique to whatever. So I'm going back and forth on this ridge, looking for when it pops up again. I'm gonna say it should pop up again because it's got to be interested in us. So I'm panning back and forth, looking for any heat signatures that I can zoom in on and look at, and I don't see anything for a couple of minutes, and then I just kind of like, fudge, it's over. And then I look behind me on the trail that we had just come up, and there he was on the downhill side of the trail, looking around a tree at me on the trail that we had just come up. So it had moved down the hill on the back, in behind us on the trail. And I'm like, there it is. He's right there. I mean, 40, 50 yards down the trail, you can see him standing on the downhill side, looking around this tree. And after what just happened with me watching it until it was gone, I wanted to do something different. So I start walking towards it, and boop, it drops down the downhill side right into a gully there and is gone. And so I cataloged in my head that behavior of the slowly moving. So now we're at the 400 in southern Missouri. The first time we see one on my thermal camera, it's a round head poking up out of the creek area about 60, 70 yards from us. And I tell the guys, there was two or three other guys there with us, and we were actually going down to collect footprints in the mud flats that we had casted that day. And it was around midnight. We were going down to get these tracks, and I'm scanning with my thermal as we're walking through this field of brush and scrub and trees, and then we're walking alongside this creek at a distance, and I see this head pop up, and I said, there's one over there at the creek looking at us. And the guys at the beginning, I said, come back and look at the monitor. When they turned to come back towards me, and I'm recording this at this point, it drops so fast that it's almost a blip in how fast it disappears. And that's because they changed their direction, and that's something to be worried about. So it dropped. And so when they got back to me, I said, okay, spin around, put your back in that direction. And I pointed to my finger on the monitor. I said, right there, you can actually still see his heat signature. He's still there. He's just ducked down. I said, watch that spot with our backs to it. So we're all standing with our backs to it, looking at my monitor. And you see this head slowly start to come up out of the grass, looking at us until it sees that our backs are to it. And then it brings its whole head up. amazing declaration that we're getting a pattern of behavior now.
Yeah.
So we've learned to turn our backs to them if we want to see, if we want them to feel free enough to move. But we've also caught one, that little one in the field that Shane walked up on. That one started out as just a single round head sticking up through the grass when we had the biologist with us. And I'm trying to identify it. It's already got the signatures of being around and poking up through the grass, which we've seen before, but I'm watching it. And this time we're just facing it. And because I'm still trying to determine, is this what we're looking at? Is this one of our things? And so we're watching it. And while we're watching it, it's doing that slowly dropping thing that the one at Bennett Springs did. And I said, Shane, I said, it's slowly dropping, just like that one at Bennett Springs. I said, that's one. I said, that is one of them. And that's when we decided that Shane would walk out to it, because you could see where it was in the grass, but it was ducked down, but you could see the heat signature where where it's showing where it's still there in the grass. So we go through that pattern where Shane starts to walk out there. And as Shane starts to head in that direction, it pops its head up and is looking straight at him. And like it can't figure out, how is this guy coming towards me? How does it know I'm here? They've never had a person walk up on them. And I'm trying to describe to Shane, I was like, slow down. I said, man, he is nervous. We don't know at this point if it's a juvenile. We don't know if it's an adult. I just know that it's one, and we've got to be careful. And so Shane is walking in that direction, and I'm like, Shane, please. And the biologist was with me too, and I was like, we've never approached one, and I was kind of panicky, because I was like, man, we run the potential of ruining the activity here by approaching one, and they will leave us alone after this, if they're not comfortable with this at all. But because we had the biologist with us, it was the first time the biologist was there, and we were determined that he see what's going on out there. And so that's why we were pushing it the way we were. So I'm directing Shane where to go, and this thing drops its head back down really fast. You can tell it's nervous. So I was nervous, and Shane was the one that was getting close to it, so you can understand he was nervous.
Yeah, he doesn't have the thermal.
Right. He's just got a flashlight in his hand, and he's walking in the dark until I tell him, okay, you're almost there. So you can only imagine the anxiety he's going through. So he gets fairly close to it, and I said, okay. I said, you're close. I said, you're close. And I'm filming with my thermal camera. You see Shane there, and he clicks his light on, and he's looking around, and he's like, oh my God, there it is. He said, it's one of the little ones. He said, it's looking right at me. And so he caught a look at its face, looking through the grass at him. And Shane eventually turns the light off, and I said, sit down. I said, you need to sit down with your back to it. And Shane squatted down, and later he told me that he couldn't make himself sit down. He said he needed to have his feet under him in case he needed to run. Even though we had a good plan. Our plan was to get close to these things and put yourself in a vulnerable position to where your back is to them and you're sitting on your ass. You can't get much more vulnerable than that. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. He was too scared. So he kept his feet under him, and he was trying to decide what to do. And so he stood up again and was trying to look at the body. At this point, it buried its face. It was laying prone on the ground, and its face was even down because it was really trying to hunker down. And so Shane was trying to step across and look at the body. The moment he did that, he just about got hit with a rock. A rock come whizzing by and landed right at his feet. So unbeknownst to us, there was a second one there that we didn't even know of, and I couldn't see it with my thermal because it was to the further back in a wood line. We didn't know till the next day where the rock came from and which one threw the rock, but we just knew that he almost got hit by a rock, and he was already full of anxiety and nervousness because of just the situation. So he said, okay. He said, I'm backing out. And he came back out to the trail where we were all standing, and we're just like, oh my God, who's ever walked up on one before? Who's ever done this? And I was scared that I said, it's over. They are not going to trust us. They are not going, there's no way. And we decided to go back to our campsite, and we went back to our campsite, and immediately on the ridge right above us, a rock come flying down and hit the Polaris. And that actually gave us some relief. We were like, okay, this is what they do all along, is they follow us along, they're watching us, and they throw rocks occasionally. So that actually made us feel good that they didn't vacate after we did that.
Yeah, they didn't go in a quiet mode and just leave.
Yes. So it actually brought us comfort. So the next morning, we couldn't wait to get up to go out there, and we filmed this whole process. We went to the same spot. We went out there. You can see the body imprint in the grass where this thing laid in the grass. It was one of the juveniles for sure because of the size. Shane laid in the same body imprint on the grass, so we get a size reference. We found where the direction that the rock came. He went in that direction, and we found the 12-inch tracks. So it was Mom that threw the rocks, and she was in the wood line, separate from where the little one was in the field. So we also found where it dropped in the field. It dropped immediately because we were coming out on that trail and it was out in the field. So it just dropped where it was. And it broke a briar bush branch that was in the body imprint. So it was laying on top of a briar bush sticker branch while it was laying there. And you could pick this branch up and you see right where it went onto the bush, where it broke off.
So it just immediately dropped.
Yes. So that means it was in the process of moving across that field when we came into view, and it had to drop immediately. And the mother was in the wood line. So why were they separate? Why weren't they together? Is that a pattern? Are we seeing a pattern where maybe it'll send a young one across the opening and then it'll follow up across the opening and not cross it together? Interesting. Anyways.
Yeah, it is. Or is it just like human children that just wander off away from mom when they're not supposed to?
Exactly. And we also speculated, this was the first time I speculated this. I posed this out to Shane. I said, Shane, I think she's got a young one. And he goes, why? Why do you say that? I said, because all she chose to do was throw a rock. She could have screamed at you. The little one in the grass actually clicked its teeth. Well, the sound that was made sounded like its teeth clicking. We don't know if it was teeth clicking or what, but it sounded like teeth clicking. When Shane was starting to step over to look at his body, it started clicking its teeth, and that's when the rock almost hit Shane. So put all of these things together. That was a nervousness where it's clicking its teeth, where that's telling its mom, okay, Mom, I've had enough. I can't take this anymore. So the rock comes flying out. But she throws a rock. She does not scream. She does not push a tree over. She doesn't make a big ruckus. And I thought to myself, she wanted you to back off, but she did it in a way where you did not know where she was. I said, I bet she's got a young one. And that's when we first started thinking, you know what, you may be right. But we won't know until later, until we find some more footprints. And we've recently found smaller footprints. The two siblings that we've been dealing with have aged out. We're not finding their prints anymore, but we've got two smaller prints now. So she indeed was probably holding one on her torso at that time. And the difference in the way she behaved to get you away from her young one was just silently throw a rock enough to get your attention that it's time for you to back out, but not know where she was because of the reason that she had a young one. Wow. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah. I mean, researchers talk about a lot of things matter-of-factly whenever it's all a bunch of speculation. However, there are certain things that within the research community, people encounter the same type behaviors independently of one another. And using distractions is one of the common theories, the common thoughts, whenever there's more than one, oftentimes one will distract you by being loud and noisy while another one is being sneaky behind your back. And so for you to speculate that there might have been an infant, I mean, we talked last night about this on the phone. I totally agree. It was the same exact thought process I went to. There has to be a reason why, the other one wasn't drawing you away from the young one. And a simple conclusion to reach is, well, there must have been an even more vulnerable young one that was worth protecting even more.
Right.
And that you mentioned aging out. Could you kind of explain what that means exactly?
Well, there was a stretch where like I said, from year to year, the two juveniles prints that we were dealing with the one that we approached in the field, and all of these other, we had a rock throwing incident one night where Shane marked the rocks and went up there where the footprints were found. And it was the two juvenile siblings. Those were the only prints that were there. They come in on the ridge above us and threw rocks. We got recordings of the movement up there where they would step out to the top of the ridge, throw the rocks, and retreat back into the wood line. We got all of those audios and the rocks landing all around our campsite. Get up the next day, we gather up about 30 or 40 rocks. Shane puts a mark on them with a Sharpie pen, goes up there where the footprints are found, and places 3 separate piles of these rocks, or not piles, but just clusters with the marked sides down. So if they show up again, they're just going to see rocks there, not see any marks on them. And then the next night we were hit with rocks again, get up the next day, and we find the rocks that we had marked and placed up there. So, and that was the 2 juveniles. So with all of this activity going on and year to year casting of their prints, so Shane was showing that their growth was changing. Their foot was going from where they looked very human-like to where, as they start to get larger and more robust or whatever, the foot starts changing a little bit and looking more like your typical straight-lined print or whatever. But anyways, unfortunately, COVID hit, and Shane's job took him to Colorado for 2 years. He had to go work in Colorado for 2 years. So there was a 2-year stretch where we were not going to that property at all. After all of this was happening, we just couldn't, and he wasn't ready to let me go by myself. So the property ran dormant. And our conversations at this time was, I told Shane, I said, we don't know when they're going to age out. And aging out means almost all the patterns that you've seen in these animals or these creatures' behaviors in their family units is you hardly ever see multiple adult prints together. Hardly ever is there multiple adults within a family unit. It's always adults and then a bunch of different siblings.
Right.
So with that just it cataloged in our brain, we just said, so there's got to come a point when they're going to age out. That's just within reason. So we get back out there, just a couple of years ago after that 2-year stretch. And that indeed was the case. We no longer was finding those prints, because if they would have kept showing the same growth pattern, when we left, they were like 9.5 and 10.5 inches. So, almost 3 years later, after a 3-year gap, they would be 11.5 and 12.5 inches. So you can't imagine if the mother's prints were around 12 inches that there would be other, that just doesn't seem to be their ways. They wouldn't allow youngsters to hang around as adults.
Where do you think they go? Do you think the alpha male or alpha female forces them out? And I mean, isn't that dangerous to do?
I don't know. I mean, it just goes to speculation. I mean, how many different ways can we speculate something? I mean, we just don't know.
A young man comes of age, he has certain desires and will seek out those desires. I certainly understand that, wants to have a family of his own and everything. But then I wonder, well, what about the females, the younger females?
Well, I mean, I know there's stuff going on the adjacent 700-acre place. So could they have set up a place for their youngsters to move on to? I don't know.
Just one of the many mysteries about these things.
And we can speculate all day long, and I see people speculate all day long, but that's still no closer to knowing. No. I mean, we just can't know.
I mean, for all we know, they open up the portal and go to a different planet.
Yeah, who knows? But we can follow patterns that were set up even before us, and that is you hardly ever find multiple adults within a family unit. So with that in mind, that at some point it's just not practical for them to stay there as an adult. So they've got to move on somewhere, whether it's grab another mate and go somewhere else, who knows? All I know is those 2 siblings have been replaced with 2 younger ones. And she might even have a younger one on her torso now. We don't know until later if another small print shows up. All we know is what the prints are showing us. We've got some 6-inch prints and some 9.5-inch prints right now. So that means there's 2 younger ones. And one of those at the time when the little one was approached in the field was on the mother's hip, apparently, for the footprints to work out right. So does that mean with these 6-inch tracks and 9.5-inch tracks, would she have a young one on her torso now, an infant, or whatever? Maybe, who knows? But we were out there a month or two ago. We're actually filming a docuseries about what's going on, and one of the producers saw one, and we caught some audio on one of the producer's cameras that was following Shane on a ridge that Scott Nelson now has a copy of, that he's transcribing for us, that clearly shows some of the morphing patterns from the Sierra Sounds. So we've got some really good stuff going on out there. And hopefully these youngsters that we're dealing with now were on the hip of the mother while we were dealing with its older siblings. So it may hit the ground at a different level than one that has to totally get used to us.
I want you to promise me that anything happens, man, you let me know.
Oh, I will. You're my bud.
Yeah, I want in the loop on this one. This is good stuff.
Well, there's a lot more that I haven't even told you about. I mean, you're really going to have Shane come on here and chat with you, because he can tell you more about the footprints. I mean, we can send you pictures of some of these footprints and what's going on. And we've got a biologist named John Morley who's involved with writing up scientific papers on the footprints. He's joining our group. He's coming out there. I mean, I couldn't be happier. My goal is to just get a thermal video of one that can't be refuted. That's really my only goal, but everything else to me is just icing on the cake. And when you're talking about layers of evidence that all fit together, that show patterns. And so if we get a thermal video with this drone, that really will just seal the deal. Everything else will just be evidence, with the drone, with this drone and its capabilities, and being able to go in ludicrous mode, which is fly at 45 miles an hour. I think once we pick one up with this drone, there's no way it can get away from the drone. Even if it's running at full speed, I think we'll still be able to track it and follow it and zoom it. This drone zooms up 4 times in thermal mode. I'm just waiting for the moment that we catch one. We catch one, whether it's out in the open. I can't imagine that little one in the grass. Imagine looking down at it with the drone.
Yeah.
I mean, so certainly the technology is on our side at this point with this drone. Now we're just waiting for the right circumstance. So, it's a numbers game. We just keep going to these areas that they're at. And one of these times we're going to catch the right moment at the right time with one at the right opportunity. And we may have the video of a lifetime. And then all of a sudden there could be people involved that would normally not be involved, because the video will certainly not, you get some details. You have something that it's standing next to that shows that it's, 4 foot taller than something. Let's say it's on the backside of a vehicle, and you see it's all chest and shoulders above the top of a vehicle or something. Who knows? There'll certainly be some circumstances on the video, whether it jumps a creek that's 40 foot wide or whatever, that can be measured, and we can get hairs because it ran by this tree, and here we are collecting hairs that we saw this tree it brushed by on the video, and so now we've got some hairs you can look at, and so there may be all kinds of components to a good long thermal of one trying to get away that you can collect layers of evidence into.
Well, Randy, I wish you best of luck, sir. Thank you for joining me and sharing this information and your stories. I do appreciate it.
I appreciate you too, buddy, because you setting things up in that park is maybe part of why I had my encounter there.